Hi, this is Emmanuelle, and today we will be talking about No Lost Generation and Refugee Awareness Week. No Lost Generation at GW was the first collegiate chapter to support the global No Lost Generation initiative. And since then, they have focused on fundraising, volunteering, educating, and advocating to support those affected by global refugee crises. I am here with the two co-directors of NLG, Olivia Issa and Hailey Scatchard, and they will tell us about NLG, Refugee Awareness Week, and the most important things that refugees are facing in today's world. So happy to have you both, Olivia and Hailey. What is the significance of Refugee Awareness Week, and what do you hope to accomplish?
Manuel, thank you so much for having us today. Yes, so Refugee Awareness Week is an initiative that started in 2017 on UC Irvine's campus and has since spread to 4 campuses that we know of so far, though we've heard of different chapters trying to get started. We started Refugee Awareness Week, or RAW, at GW last fall, 2019, last school year. And this year we've expanded it even more. So last year we hosted 6 days of events that brought professionals to campus to interact with students. We had educational events, fundraisers. We raised almost $2,000 for a program in a camp in Greece. And this year we've sort of continued to build on what we started in 2019 by bringing on 12 members of the GW community to plan Refugee Awareness Week events. So the goal is really to bring awareness and inspire action on campus around refugee issues, and to engage the GW community in our local context of what we can do in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area, the DMV. So throughout the week, we'll be fundraising for a nonprofit called Asylum Works, which maybe we'll touch on again later. I know Hailey used to work with them. So beyond just attending events, we're hoping to fundraise for our local community of folks seeking asylum.
Amazing, and you mentioned Asylum Works. Can you tell us a bit more about this organization and why the work they are doing is so important?
Certainly, thank you, Emmanuelle. So Asylum Works was founded to address a longstanding problem. Asylum seekers, who are those seeking refugee status from the safety of the United States, they arrive in the US with many needs, but few resources of their own to fulfill those needs. And these needs often persist through what is typically a long and arduous legal process. Given the backlog in the asylum processing system right now. And many of these needs actually interfere with an asylum seeker's ability to participate in the legal process. So Asylum Works was designed to complement the variety of legal providers already available, but they provide holistic services and support to help asylum seekers regain confidence and control over their lives so they can fully participate in their own asylum process. And they do this through direct services, education, and support. And their model is meant to strengthen communities by empowering asylum seekers within them to rebuild their lives with dignity and purpose, given that asylum seekers make up a very large part of so many of our communities. And asylum seekers who access Asylum Works services are dramatically more likely to win their legal case. So there's clear proof that providing those with basic resources to fulfill their needs really supports this hard legal process of seeking safety and seeking a new life in the US.
What are some of the things that you would say people need to know about refugees and the refugee crisis around the world?
This is a really important question, so I'm so glad you bring this up. Something that I think a lot of people don't realize. So we're here in the US, and every year we hear this number, this refugee admissions cap that the president determines. And under President Obama, that was about 120,000. Under Trump, that was 18,000, if that. And we say, oh, wow, how could we, it's so impressive that we can resettle 120,000 people to the US. but there are about 23 million people with refugee status alone worldwide. That's not even including people who are displaced within their country, called internally displaced people. So of 23 million, 1% of refugees are resettled every year, not to the US, that's 1% are resettled globally to all resettlement countries. So under the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees office, there are countries around the world that commit to resettling refugees, like Germany, Japan, Canada, the US, that have these programs, but it is only a tiny drop in the bucket. So when we think about refugees, 99% of them are living in what's called host countries. So this is, if you're fleeing Syria, you'd end up in a host country, most likely like Lebanon or Jordan, where you see those, all those images of camps and folks living in the city working for $3 a month or a week, and kids as young as 8 starting to work, girls and women being married at 10, 11, 12, so that their families don't have to worry about feeding them. That is 99% of the circumstances, not to generalize, because, it's not a monolithic experience, but the majority of refugees are not living in these countries of resettlement, that we hope for them, where they can rebuild their lives and experience what we call durable solutions. And durable solutions are, what we all hope for, where you can achieve education access and potentially, higher education access, where you can work under humane conditions and be protected by law, and really have faith in your government to protect you and to not be penalized or jailed for seeking human rights. So when we talk about the global refugee crisis, we're talking about that 1% that is able to be resettled, because resettlement is not, the end all be all, like it's hard as well. But we're also talking about the 99% who do not achieve resettlement and who are living in those host countries. For example, Lebanon has, 1/4 of its population of the people living in Lebanon are refugees or undocumented migrants. And so the refugee crisis addresses the countries where these crises are started, like Syria, Myanmar, and then the host countries that are, often overwhelmed. They don't have the infrastructure to support these high numbers of, migrants. And then we're talking about countries of resettlement that are, potentially could do so much more to support this international crisis. So, I think, there are many layers to it, but I just really wanted to emphasize the fact, that statistic of 1% resettlement globally, because I think that's a really hard number to face, So.
Absolutely. And it is clear that both of you are incredibly passionate and knowledgeable about this subject. And we'd love to know, how did you start on this path of refugee advocacy?
Yeah, certainly. So I can start. I think historically, my family faced displacement, but that's not really what drove me to pursue this topic and this issue. To be frank, what really made me interested in this was after volunteering with Asylum Works. And I know that's a crazy connection, but way back in freshman year, being able to work with them and meet with their clients and really engage with the people who we frequently talk about, that was such a valuable experience, and something that's really made me connect with it and keep coming back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I also have, family members who have faced religious persecution and displacement. And I think I was definitely raised with these values, but what really pushed me into this is in 2015, I took a trip to Lebanon to see family for a family wedding. And everywhere we went, there were Syrian migrants living and working. You saw people 6, 8 years old on the street trying to sell you flowers and working in shops. And it was very clear that, even like the land behind my teta, my grandmother's house, my great grandmother, she was living on a mountain in like the north, like in this just tiny little village. And behind her house, down the slope of the mountain, was this huge tarp. And, we realized it was a makeshift camp for folks who had fled their homes, and to look at the privilege that I have, and have had growing up, and to say, there's so much room here. I know that, we have our own problem in the US of internally displaced people, people without homes. But, at the end of the day, we do have the room and the resources. We could be doing so much more for people within the US and people experiencing displacement abroad. So in 2015, I came back to Chicago. I'm from Chicago, and started a club in my high school. I started volunteering, and I'm from the South Side. So we brought some resettlement resources to the South Side of Chicago, and the more work I did, the more I wanted to keep doing it. So this has been a 6-year journey, and hopefully will last even longer. So,
and I think as well, one of the other important topics that No Lost Generation focus on, but you also mentioned at the beginning, was lobbying. And since No Lost Generation is participating in lobbying throughout Refugee Awareness Week, is there any specific piece of legislation that you are advocating for?
Yes, absolutely. So we have 2 bills that we're lobbying for. The first is called the Lady Liberty Act of 2021, which is the House Resolution 977, I believe. And it would amend Section 207A, getting technical here, of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which would set a refugee resettlement floor. So this is a minimum number of refugees who must be admitted to the country every year, regardless of the president's determination for a resettlement path. So every year, like we've seen, the president says, okay, this year we'll do 100,000, this year we'll do 80,000, this year we'll do, at one point it was like 250,000. And so this would say, okay, you can set a number above 125,000. You can say, okay, we'll resettle 300,000, but you can never go below 125,000, regardless of what decision the president makes. So this is not only a cap, but this is a floor, meaning that you have to resettle this number. So under previous caps, President Obama would say, okay, we have to resettle 120,000. This was the maximum number of refugees that could be resettled. So maybe they resettled 108,000 that year. So they didn't quite reach the cap. This floor would say, it's not the cap we're talking about, it's the minimum that have to be resettled. So the cap would always have to be above 125,000. So this is obviously ambitious, but I think could have a really impressive impact on the number of refugees that are resettled, because I think in the past, especially under COVID, we can commit to a number, but you can say, oh, we don't actually have to meet it. There's never been a minimum number of refugees that have to be resettled. So establishing a minimum would be excellent, especially in circumstances like COVID that say, okay, yeah, it's hard, but like we have to do it because we've committed to it. So the second piece of legislation is known as the New Deal for Americans. And this is active in both the House and the Senate. They're equivalent bills. The first is in the House, it's number 1308, numbers. And the second in the Senate is 433. And there's sort of a variety of plans outlined in this bill. And so the priorities for us would be establishing a national office of new Americans to support immigrants and refugees, creating grant programs for organizations that provide legal services, English language lessons, and workforce training. It would change the age at which citizens can petition for eligible family members to receive an immigrant visa. Right now it's 21, and it would change it to 18. And then it would reverse Trump's public charge rule, which has been really detrimental to those seeking asylum and protections in the US.
Absolutely. Thank you, Olivia. And I think One of the other most important issues that refugees are facing is education. And with only 3% of refugees having access to higher education in comparison to the 37% global rate, is there anything that George Washington University and its students can do to help alleviate this disparity?
Thank you. I'll jump in on this one again, if that's okay. This is something I'm very passionate about because when we talk about, again, durable solutions, so we talked about refugee resettlement is important because it gives displaced folks access to rebuilding their lives. And a big part of rebuilding your life is being educated and having the degrees you need to access work opportunities, and real wages. So when we talk about a 3% global rate of higher education access, that is sort of terrifying to me because that's a huge population that is not able to access those durable solutions through education. So a way that GW has been engaged in this is a program that started by an excellent member of ours, Uzma Rentia, last year called New Horizons. And this program pairs GW students with refugee status in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. And these students in the DMV are juniors and seniors in high school who are, entering the college application process, and GW students have been really involved in mentoring them through that process. So USMA, with support from research and professionals, has created an excellent curriculum for mentors to guide mentees through this process about career planning of like, what do you want to major in so that you can then get a job that you're excited about, but also how do you write an application, like what are essays, what are admission staff looking for, and how do you write an essay? How do you get in touch with college support programs once you're there, that kind of thing, because refugee students, even those who have achieved resettlement, have a higher dropout rate from higher education institutions than non-refugee students, often because they aren't able to access the support they need in those higher education institutions. So I think this has been really crucial. And then something that I've been representing No Lost Generation on is the Student Voices for Refugees steering committee. There's a program out of Rutgers University that has been leading the country in developing and researching channels for higher education institutions like GW that are in the US to create more welcoming campuses. And so throughout the year, I've been doing research, meeting with professionals, folks who already have these programs established, and I think it would be feasible to support refugee students better on GW's campus because there is not currently a scholarship specifically for refugee students at GW, which surprises a lot of people because we have such a hearty Elliott School curriculum around supporting displaced people globally. And so you say, why is this not already established? And there are many avenues for us to build that kind of thing. So I do hope that we can do more. And that's a focus for No Lost Generation going into next year, is improving higher education access globally, but specifically at GW for refugee students. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Of course. And I think a key word that you mentioned is global. And if there's something that we have learned in the past couple of years, is that the refugee crisis isn't bound to one race, gender, nationality, or geographical border. And as such, it definitely does require many people and countries to find holistic, effective, and durable solutions, like you mentioned. So how can the response of the international community improve to meet the needs of refugees?
Certainly, I can try and tackle this one. I think the fact that the refugee crisis spans so many factors of identity sheds light on the humanity of the situation. I think a lot of us can connect to at least one of these facets of identity. But I think this is a fact that many governments internationally and right here at home choose to omit or overlook. They overlook the fact that these people are humans with families and goals and hopes and dreams and experiences and lives. And I think frequently this issue is boiled down to numbers and fear mongering, very sadly. And I think an important first step before we can move much further is really recognizing the basic humanity of people who are displaced and providing for the basic needs associated with that. And that's definitely not the standard. It sounds like so minimal and so basic, but it's not the standard worldwide, especially with a lot of the policies that come out of the EU. There are a lot of temporary kind of stopgap measures, but these don't serve the people they're meant to serve. They don't help those who are fleeing persecution. And so I think that's ideally what would change first. Ideally, we would see some recognition higher up that this is a crisis, I suppose. I don't know if we can call it a crisis anymore. It's an ongoing issue that needs attention and needs recognition and needs durable solutions, as Olivia has mentioned before. But I also don't think it's very useful right now to wait for that kind of top-down response and top-down recognition. So I do think there are a lot of organizations out there that are already doing the good work. And these are smaller community-based organizations. And I think the reason these orgs on the ground are a lot more successful is because they're based in trauma-informed, experience-based work led by people who are very close to the issue, who have experienced it in the past. And to be frank, I think supporting these organizations is our best hope, and being mindful of where we donate, what we advocate for, who we're supporting. I think that's a really great way to improve this international response. Yeah.
That is great. And you mentioned as well the role of the individual. And I think you both have showed that as students, if it's through volunteering or advocating, there is something to do in these situations. But still, to this day, if it's students or in general people, they still believe that they don't have the power to help refugees. So what would you tell these people? How would you tell them that they can actually make a difference in the lives of refugees?
Yeah, so I have a couple of ideas. Yeah, I think oftentimes bringing the stories closer to home and breaking down some of those very broad and ambiguous statistics is very useful. I haven't done too much research, but refugees are resettled in many cities and towns across the US. So the chances are the people that we're talking about are not very far from you. And I think that's a very important thing to remember, especially when I started working with Asylum Works. These people form a huge part of the community. And if you never speak to them about their stories, and I'm not advocating to go ask everyone about their background stories, but unless you are aware of this, you don't really realize just what a vital part of the community that people who have faced displacement are. I think that's a very important fact to keep in mind, that it's not always an overseas issue. There are people here close to you who you're probably friends with that have experienced some of these issues. I think going along with that, supporting local community-based organizations that support people who have experienced displacement is incredibly important. I think even speaking about and learning about Asylum Works is very helpful in supporting their work and, helping close that, current service gap. And I think more broadly, it really starts with learning about the experiences of refugees in Asylum Works. Like I said, humanizing those broad statistics is a great first step. And after you've done a little bit of learning, perhaps, broadening the conversation, speaking to friends and family has tremendous value in changing that ongoing narrative that is especially developing here and now in the United States. So I wouldn't underestimate the power of that and the power of learning and educating and, trying to build a better and more productive, more supportive, more human narrative. Yeah, I think from there, that really offers a good base to then advocate on behalf of policies and legislation that benefits refugees and asylum seekers more broadly. So those are some of my ideas. I'm curious if Olivia has anything to add as well.
Yeah, I think those are the key points. I think I'd just like to point out a few things that we as students can do, because I think it's more achievable than we'd expect. One thing is, if you are part of a student organization, you can get SA funding to bring in speakers, and you can pay people for their time, which I love. And you can make a point to bring in folks who have experienced displacement to talk about, whatever topic it may be, and make sure to pay them for their time, because that supports not only them, but also if they have family abroad, they're sending that money abroad, and that helps toward building towards durable solutions. So another way that I know a lot of students, especially in the Elliott School, are taking language classes. There's this organization called Netakellam, Natakallam, Netakellam, which connects you with refugees who have been trained to teach their native language. And then you can do like single sessions, you can do 10 sessions in succession, where you're meeting with someone periodically, speaking their language, learning their language, paying them for their time. But also, I think a lot of beautiful relationships have come out of that. And that's a great way for you to start to understand on a human level what other people are going through. So if it might feel inaccessible to say, okay, yeah, go find someone to connect with, but there are so many ways, especially given the virtual world that we're in now, there's so many organizations that connects you in ways that's not just saying, tell me about your experience, because I can't go Google it for myself. It's saying, I want to support you financially. I want to support you in the work you're doing. Let's build a relationship. And I think that's a really accessible and positive thing that we can do as students. And it doesn't always have to be something that comes out of our own pockets, because again, the SA can fund these kinds of things when we bring folks to GW. So I think there are a lot of ways we as students can be more involved.
Thank you so much, Olivia and Hailey, truly about sharing all of your passion about this topic and your vast knowledge. I think after this conversation, we all have a clear idea as students how we can actually truly improve the lives of refugees nationally, but also internationally. Thank you so much to both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.